All right, we'll go ahead and get moving here. Again, thank you for joining. Today we've got a very exciting webinar focused around customer messaging for open payments. My name is Jason Boers. I'm the Executive Director for the Secure Technology Alliance and also the U.S. Payments Forum. So I will help moderate the session. Devin, if you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. So a little bit of background on the U.S. Payments Forum is we are the largest cross-industry stakeholder group with representation across multiple pieces of the payments industry. We've been in existence now for over 12 years. Our remit and vision towards the industry is to make payments more efficient, simple, and secure. As we have over 150 different members within the organization that participate in a variety of our different activities, with a focus around what you see here, which is the 4 pillars of our organization, right? So we are focused around collaboration, education within the industry, communication, and various forms of networking, right? So that really is the remit for the organization. Devin, if you want to move to the next slide. Please, as I mentioned, some of our membership, as you can see here, it is very broad and diverse. A lot of these members have been with us for this journey in excess of 20 years at this stage. We do have representation from across the U.S., but continue to grow in other parts of the world as well. So hopefully this gives you a little bit better sense of some of the backing and the people that are participating on a daily basis with our remit within the payment space. So thank you again to all of our members. Next slide, please. Right, so joining me today is we have 4 other speakers, which will go through the bulk of the presentation. First, I'd like to introduce Lawrence Sutton, who comes to us from Consult Hyperion. He'll pick up after I get done here in a second. Behind him, we've got Rory Wilson from Discover Global Network, Sophia Malitz from TriMet, and then also Dave Whipple from TriMet. So the 4 of them will join me today in presenting again the bulk of the content today. So with that, the next slide, please, Devin. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lawrence, and he will walk through the history of EMV and milestones in the transit payment space. So Lawrence, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jason. As one of the co-chairs of the USPF Transit Contactless Open Payments Working Committee, I'm really excited about this webinar today. We'll be covering a little bit of history about EMV and milestones in transit payments, as well as some background on open payments in transit. But what I'm most excited about is letting you hear directly from the staff at TriMet, who launched open payments back in 2017. They've had to adapt their messaging about payments to the post-COVID world where everything is now contactless. And as their numbers of adoption will show, they've done an excellent job in doing so. Next slide, Devin, please. So to get a better understanding of this project, I thought it was important to provide a baseline of knowledge about the history of EMV. Without the EMV chip, we wouldn't be here today. But I also don't want to spend too much time on it. So let me put in a quick plug for the EMVCo podcast called Talking Payments. Episode 6 is about the role and history of the EMV chip, and I strongly suggest you give it a listen. For our purposes here, I want to talk about 3 main events, though. The initial groundwork for open payments goes back to 1996, when EMVCo published the EMV standards, and these were initially implemented using contact chips and have now expanded to contactless chips and also to mobile devices that communicate via NFC technology. Then, in 2007, we had the first EMV contactless transaction with RBS Streamline, now WorldPay from FIS. It was at a McDonald's in Canary Wharf in the UK, and the customer drove a race car to emphasize the speed of the transaction. And then in 2015, the US implemented EMV. It was a long time coming, and thousands of merchants followed suit to start using contactless payment terminals. Next slide, please. So how does this apply to transit? How has contactless technology transformed transit payments? Back in 1995, the world's first transit contactless payment card was launched in Seoul, South Korea. Many agencies followed suit and launched their own closed-loop payment cards. In the U.S., the first agency to allow bank card acceptance at a terminal was UTA in Salt Lake City all the way back in 2009. It was very forward-thinking. It was featured at a USPF Payments Summit that year. Then, in 2012, Transport for London started accepting open-loop EMV contactless payments. The specifications they developed laid the foundation for future projects like what we're seeing roll out today in the US. In 2017, TriMet launched open payments, and in 2019, MTA New York launched them as part of their Omni Fare Collection system. The marketing for the Omni campaign covered the city and was even on a billboard in Times Square. That marketing aspect has been an important part of the success of that project and why we wanted to bring you this webinar today. Now, I'll pass this over to Rory Wilson from Discover, who'll give you additional background on open payments.
Thanks very much, Lawrence. Devin, if you could advance the slide. So when you consider the evolution of transit marketing, there have been a number of significant events specific to contactless payments in transit. London used contactless payments during the 2012 Olympics, and Transport for London, the tube and buses, converted their system to open-loop contactless by 2015. This was a key inflection point for the growth of contactless payments globally as payment networks began to see the contactless halo effect. That is, once a customer establishes a habit of tapping their personal card to ride, they continue that behavior at coffee shops, grocery stores, drugstores, and other retail merchants that have high volume, low dollar point of sale transactions. The New York City MTA took a really interesting approach to their conversion to contactless in that they led with the consumer option to tap their own payment card to ride versus a contactless closed loop card as London did with the Oyster. This enabled them to convert more customers to self-service versus having the added expense of maintaining both the Metro card and a contactless closed loop system at the same time. Additionally, the MTA leveraged their scale as one of the most prolific owners of out-of-home advertising space in New York City by inviting the payment networks to advertise on their behalf and to demonstrate the benefits of contactless payments to cardholders and riders. This both built an audience and scaled consumer interest while at the same time providing a sort of public service announcement on how to tap to ride. If you could advance the slide, please. From a payment network perspective, that change in habituation led to changes in payment preferences that moved the contactless card to top of wallet position. This is essentially the holy grail for credit card marketers. Transit has been seen as the gateway to changing cardholder behavior, and contactless soon became heavily promoted globally, especially in the United States as the MTA began to move to open loop contactless from their Metro card in the timeframe going from 2019 to 2020. Our colleagues in New York had the benefit of lessons learned in London and scaled quickly. As noted, the benefits of contactless transactions enable a virtuous cycle across the payments ecosystem. Merchants get faster throughput on checkout lines, consumers get to pay and get out of line more quickly, and get to use their card in a new way. And banks and payment networks increase customer loyalty and transaction flow. The shift from inserting your credit card to tapping to pay has been a positive one for the consumer, as it really is fast, easy, and secure. Could you advance the slide, please? Here are some best practices that were used in that MTA campaign and in other campaigns for transit. A key element to consider is breakthrough. And breakthrough refers to the ability for the image or for the message to capture the consumer's attention in a crowded space, like a bus or a train station. Having simple messages with clear calls to action or awareness are key. Additionally, the habit really starts to change at checkout, so ensuring that the point of sale, whether it's at a turnstile, a bus validator, or another key placement, is absolutely critical to contactless benefit messaging. Payment networks, banks, and transit agencies should leverage unified messaging across their communication channels to build consumer awareness and ultimately preference for tapping to ride. This could go across a range of digital placements as noted on this slide, and integration with rideshare apps and map-based apps is an emerging space. As you can see with your own favorite rideshare apps, you can easily access, in many cases, public transit and other forms of transportation as well. Could you advance the slide, please? Tailoring to your market is really important. Obviously, it's very different outside of New York City, but the basics of the communications are the same. To reduce the complexity of the marketing mix, consider these points. First, keep it simple. Second, make the message consistent in each placement. And third, repeat it often. Leverage every media available on the agency's physical assets like stations, buses, trains, bus shelters, in your app, in community newspapers or metro newspapers. Look for local businesses who would benefit from advertising to transit riders to partner with on those messages. Now, let's hear from Portland, Oregon's TriMet to learn about how they address their conversion to open loop contactless.
Thank you, Lori. So I'm going to kick it off on behalf of TriMet. I'm the Director of Fair Revenue and Administrative Services, and then I'll hand it over to Dave Whipple, who manages all of our digital customer communications and was really instrumental with the actual launch of open payments at TriMet. So first off, just to introduce TriMet a bit, we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of public transit and operations. So TriMet provides light rail, commuter rail, bus rapid transit, as well as paratransit services. And then we also operate the streetcar on behalf of the city of Portland. We're seeing a little bit over 150,000 weekday boardings. That's a significantly depressed number still due to the pandemic, but that number is climbing on a weekly basis. Hop Fastpass is our primary fare payment solution. So I oversee payments on behalf of TriMet CTran, which is Vancouver, Washington's bus service, as well as Portland Streetcar. In our last fiscal year, June through June, we collected $55 million in annual revenue through the Hop Fastpass solution, and then added about $10 million in cash to that for Portland. So, you know, my team does everything from counting cash in a money room to sort of that leading edge innovation of open payments. So to dive into Hop Fastpass, the next slide shows our core system integrator, which is in it, and the various vendors that participate as a part of our fair payment ecosystem. So TriMet's strategy in launching Hop Fastpass was to provide a back-end architecture that was open, so that we could go out and procure the best vendors for each of the components that we wanted to provide as a part of collecting fare. So here you can see, you know, we have hardware from Init. We also have hardware from Shine Bachman. We have integrated with the retail network, Ready Credit. We've integrated with a mobile app provider, Movable, to provide sort of the full breadth of services for collecting fare. From an open payment perspective, we've worked with Wells Fargo's First Data to actually encrypt the open payment transaction on validators, and that allows us to offer open payments. So if we do one click forward, this shows the full range of fare media available for customers who want to pay their fare. So the traditional closed-looped cards on the left, virtual cards, we have integrations with Apple and Google to integrate into the native wallets, and then have worked with the key payment card brands to be able to offer open payments for MasterCard, Visa, Discover, and Amex. And that's not just the physical card, it's across digital assets as well. So 2017, when we launched open payments that summer, you know, very few people were using contactless open payments to pay for anything. I think of myself as, you know, fairly technology thinking and technical forward. And, you know, none of the payment cards in my wallet in 2017 had that contactless option. So if we progress to the next slide, this view only goes back to 2019, but, you know, if I had extended this all the way to 2017, you know, we were seeing less than 1% of total taps in our system coming from open payments. So the progression of adoption pre-pandemic was very steady, but very, very slow. So, you know, pre-pandemic, we were processing about 80,000 open payment transactions per month, and that represented, you know, a pretty small percentage of our overall number of transactions. We saw a huge plunge in 2020, like every transit agency did, but since 2020, we have.
So since the pandemic, we've more than doubled our. Since pre-pandemic, we've almost doubled the number of taps that we're seeing from open payments. As of April this spring, that was about 172% increase from pre-pandemic levels and almost 1,000% increase since the bottom of the pandemic. And now being December, you know, we've passed that 1,000% increase mark. So that's representative of about 12% of all fares that we collect for full fare riders who are paying their own way. So, you know, we still don't have open payments available to our reduced fare riders, but a very large percentage of our full fare riders are taking advantage of open payments. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Dave, who will talk through like much of the messaging that we actually used to communicate to our ridership base.
Thank you, Sophia. Appreciate it. So since TriMet launched the Hop Fastpass system in 2017, we have been training our customers to tap to pay their fare. And this is the primary action that's required to interact with the Hop fare card readers, and thus became the main call to action in our communications. This tapping action covers various fare instruments, including our closed loop Hop cards, as well as contactless credit cards and phones. And although open payments has technically been an option for our riders since we launched Hop, it's been more of a by the way in our messaging until recently. The emphasis in our messaging had been on using a Hop card, which helps ensure that frequent riders are getting the best deal through fare capping, and that they have the ability to use discounted fares for youth, seniors, and people with disabilities. Promoting the Hop closed loop card was also important in transitioning our regular riders at the time from traditional paper fare instruments to our new Hop electronic fare system. Next slide, please. But over the last 2 years, we have gradually shifted our messaging to include open payments as a primary way to pay. Now, this slide reflects our current how to pay your fare messaging today. It reads, to pay, tap the green Hop reader at the Max or West station or inside the bus every time you board. You can tap with your phone or contactless credit card to pay the $2.50 adult fare, or tap with a Hop card, virtual Hop card, or Hop ticket. The reader also shows the instructions that you can tap with your card or your phone. And it's not shown here, but an animation on the Hop reader cycles through which kinds of cards and platforms are accepted. Next slide, please. So today we are leading in our messaging with open payments at the top of our list of payment options. And we're emphasizing convenience and speed of casually hopping on transit for any kind of trip using essentially whatever's in your wallet or purse. Not only have contactless cards become more commonplace, this messaging made sense for us during COVID as public health measures were encouraging contactless transactions. And moving forward, we expect that the ease of use of paying with contactless cards and phones will help support our ridership recovery efforts as we continue to encourage people to use transit for occasional and spontaneous trips in addition to daily commuting. The idea is to reinforce to customers that if you're interested in riding transit, you really don't need to do anything or go to much effort to get a transit fare. You're probably already carrying it. Next slide, please. Now here's an example of our how-to webpage on TriMet.org detailing how to use a contactless bank card to pay your fare. This includes an embedded YouTube video and visuals reinforcing the presence of the contactless symbol. And a few elements to note: we explicitly communicate where customers should tap their cards, both on our how-to materials and on the Hop reader screens themselves. And this helps make sure that people have a good experience by tapping in the correct location, that is, on the tap target instead of on the screen itself. And it reinforces that you should only tap one fare instrument at a time, as opposed to tapping your wallet or purse where there may be multiple cards that could result in card clash. Our how-to webpage for using a bank card on a phone includes links to instructions for setting up your mobile wallet for the 3 platforms we support: Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Samsung Pay. So we're contemplating a future paid campaign now that would focus on the benefits of open payments. But so far, this kind of messaging that you're seeing here has rolled out primarily in owned channels such as our website and social media. Now, here's an example of our how-to video for using a contactless bank card to pay your fare. Thanks, Devin. Next slide. So to wrap up, as we look for ways to make transit easier and more appealing to more people, we believe that we can make the fare payment element simpler by encouraging people to use whatever payment method is most convenient for them. We will continue to encourage our regular riders to get a Hop card for the best value, but there are now different payment methods emphasized for different audiences. And open payments rounds out the many ways that you can pay on TriMet. We think it can help get more riders in the door by offering convenience and speed when boarding and minimizing customer effort. We're now seeing an increase in open payments usage by our regular riders, and we believe it can help facilitate more spontaneous trips and trips by occasional riders as well, giving people a fast and easy path to get on board TriMet and give transit a try. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you again, panelists, for walking through that information. As I would encourage everyone, as I did send out a note in the chat, but if you have any questions, please feel free to tap those into the Q&A chat box, and we'll be sure to get those addressed. So we do have a couple that came in. Hopefully you guys have seen those, both probably for TriMet. But the first one came from Hayden Evans. So I'll open this up to Dave and Sophia. Does TriMet have plans to retire their closed loop media in the near future?
That's a good question. So we do not have any plans to retire our extended use closed loop media. That's the heavy plastic card. We still see a lot of utilization with that card. And, you know, we see differences in age for card preference. And a lot of our riders do fall into an older age category and really prefer that physical card. We are trying to significantly reduce utilization of the limited use fare media. So today our ticket vending machines issue a heavy paper stock ticket with a chip inside that can be tapped on the system. And we're hoping to issue an RFP this next calendar year, which will remove the limited use media from TVMs. The TVMs will only issue extended use media. And that will significantly reduce sort of our closed loop footprint, at least from the limited use perspective.
Very good. Thank you, Sophia. Is it, Dave, anything you wanted to add there?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Thank you. Is
And
another
Jason, if I could,
question? Yeah, no, go ahead and jump in.
Jason, if I could just chime in real quick. One of the,
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that TriMet's looking at doing that with their limited use media. That's really cool. One of the biggest advantages that people often don't think about that is these limited use riders who are just paying for a single ride to go from A to B are really lost in the agency's data. And the ability to convert those riders to either extended use media or open loop payments means you now understand that full round trip customers are taking, and you understand more of their behaviors, and you can actually plan your services better. Those riders are really invisible to the agency today. Other than that someone did a trip from A to B, you have no idea about their patterns and real usage, and it's a big benefit for the agency to do so.
Very good. Thank you for that, Lawrence. Is another question from John Ordonez. What happens if a device goes offline? Right, and I will open that up to the group.
I can talk about the TriMet specific implementation, but then I'd be really interested in Lawrence or Rory if you know how other agencies are tackling that question. So I'm assuming that the device, meaning the validator, so where an open payment card is being tapped. So our validators at light rail stations are connected via Ethernet. And so the online performance is very high for validations. It's close to 98% of all taps are validated in real time, which is under that 500 millisecond window. For the remaining 2% of validations that happen offline, there aren't quite all of the checks that happen, but the token is still saved on the validator and then processed online as soon as the validator reconnects with the back office. And for our platform validators, that's a pretty short turnaround for then uploading that transaction up to the back office for online processing. So we do the majority of our fare inspections on our light rail trains. And so, those inspections have a very, very high percentage of accuracy when inspecting open payment cards. On the bus side, our validators don't hit quite that 98% on online performance, but we issue much fewer fare inspectors to our buses. So that's kind of the difference there. And we're able to process open payment taps that are uploaded, within the day or within even a couple of days. So we're still collecting that revenue, if not in real time, for validators that are offline.
Very good. Thank you
so
for
Sophia,
that.
that's good to know. Yeah, it's good to know
please,
from a revenue standpoint. Yeah, from a security standpoint and the model of the MTT for these transactions, the requirement for the branch is that you do 3 local checks, even if the device is offline. And that's to make sure that the bank card is not expired, that is ODA enabled or offline data authentication enabled, and that it's not on a local hot or deny list. And therefore, you can make sure that that card has not been used previously, and those deny lists have to be updated. I believe most of the brands have come in at a 15-minute interval. So there has to be some type of local check to make sure that that's not some type of repeat person going around with their expired or their bad bank card that has no funds to it. So there are protections for the agency to be sure that there's not someone trying to scam them and ride for free in their system using open payments.
Very good. Thank you for that. Any other comments on this question? Okay, additional question from Ryan Bauman. So what does the registration process look like for an open loop bank card? I'll open that up to the group.
I've dove into this one, so I can start with it if that sounds okay. Okay, so TriMet does not have a registration process at the moment. All open payment cards are anonymous cards in the system. But we have worked closely with our partners to see what it would take to allow riders to register their open payment cards. And we've architected a solution that's dependent on a unique identifier called PAR, which is outside of PCI compliance requirements. And so it gives us as the agency more flexibility for tracking that card, and in fact, tracking all iterations of that card, whether it's on a watch or a phone throughout the system. So, you know, it's still going to be a while before we implement it, but that is the sort of main tool that we're anticipating using to allow riders to register their open payment cards, view their history, view their fare capping status. They can view 1 day and 1 month fares on their cards, and then potentially also associate a reduced fare with their open payment card, so that if you qualify for our reduced fares, you can still use your open payment card to receive that appropriate fare. So that's coming, you know, maybe in the 1 to 2 year range, but it is something that we hope to introduce. And I think that the U.S. Payments Forum did a webinar on PAR some time back. So there's some good resources out there around it.
That we have. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly have, Sophia. It was a good webinar, and it was a good paper they did indeed. For some of the projects I've worked on in New York and in Dallas both, they do support registration of open payment cards. For New York, they recently announced that they're offering the ability for people who have concessions to register their open loop bank card and be able to use that and receive that concession. In Dallas, they've actually implemented it similar to what they do with their tap card, where you have to register to get the monthly fare capping. And so they've made it an equitable fare policy between the bank cards and the closed loop cards. Customers can just go on the website, enter their bank card information. It's stored, you know, covered via PCI and securely stored. And that customer now has their registered bank card. They can see their transactions, et cetera. And most implementations of PAYGO also offer customers the ability to just keep their card anonymous, but they can go in and print receipts and see their transactions and see the charges that they've done through open payments through using the web portal. So a lot of all the same capabilities they can do today with their closed loop card, they can do with an open loop card as well.
Very good. Thank you, Lawrence. Sophia, we do have one directed to you. So do you have any data on transaction and interchange fees you could share with us?
I don't have anything offhand, but the interchange fees are published online. So with a little bit of digging, you should be able to find some interchange fees published online. The large caveat that we're working through right now, just for full disclosure and for interest's sake, since TriMet was the first public transit agency to continuously run an open payment solution, we were grandfathered into this process. There wasn't a dedicated certification set up for public agencies in the U.S. to certify our systems for open payment acceptance. Since we launched, there's a new standard that's referred to as MTT, which helps sort of transit agencies take full advantage of all of the interchange fee and transaction fees available to government entities. And so that is a direction that we are moving down the road to take advantage of the best fees available to transit agencies.
Very good. Thank you for that.
If I can hop in real quick.
Yeah,
it's a very timely question for me. I was just in a call this morning with a transit agency I'm working on an upcoming fare payment project, and their finance department did some analysis of what they expect to do, what their PAYGO fees will, or what their open payment bank fees will do, and they actually found that they will have significant savings even just at the bank card fees. This is without looking at the cost of media and the uptake and maintenance of you know, the devices and TVM machines, but actually even just at the bank card fee with some of the deals that are going out at this point in time, they're expecting to have savings and reduction in their bank fee cost once they roll out open payments. It's exciting time for open payments.
Undoubtedly. Thank you, guys. Is additional question, this one probably again for the group, but have any of you had much marketing and or operational support from the payment brands and or local financial institutions? Did you find it easy to engage with them? Any thoughts on that one?
Rory, can you speak to Discover and what you've seen at Omni? I know Sophia and I have talked a lot.
Sure, absolutely happy to do so. So I think, as I mentioned in the course of the presentation, the transportation sort of ecosystem is a really important one for payment brands. And I think there's some great examples, around the industry of great collaborations between payment brands and local agencies. Certainly, the New York story that Lawrence had shared in one of his first slides, that was, probably the largest one that anyone can speak to. It was certainly multi-year and happened during the course of COVID, which sort of brought the word contactless to everyone's attention and rapidly accelerated adoption. In terms of other markets who support and work with payment brands, I know there's a wide variety of cities across the country that have similar, although slightly different stories. Every market is different. New York is, obviously the largest in the country and most comprehensive. So that creates different advertising opportunities than exist in other markets. So I think, from a payment network's perspective, I think it's really important for each agency to understand the ecosystem within which they're operating with and where the opportunities for collaboration and partnership exist, whether that's with a local financial institution, a payment brand, or even local businesses. I think one of the key things to take a look at is transit's a really effective marketing mechanism. It's a great way to get messages in front of people from an out-of-home perspective. And the more opportunities you have to bring merchants into that pipeline, the better chance that you're going to improve the messaging and, of course, potentially revenues as well. But I'd love to hear some of the experiences that others have had.
That was good. Thank you, Roy. I don't know if this next question is probably for you or not, but we have a question from Ian Newberg as well. Do we have information on the open payment usage penetration rate for Omni?
I'm sorry, I can't speak to that off the cuff.
Okay. Is Lawrence, Sophia, or Dave, you have any insights on that one?
I don't have the numbers at my grasp right now. There was a recent press conference about it. They had continued to see increases in it, but I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head.
Okay, Ian, we'll take that one away, see if we can't get that addressed through the membership. Additional question from Santander is how is the open payment transaction cost lining up? Is it affordable? Any numbers that can be shared?
Well, I think as Sophia said, the interchange rates are available on websites. You just have to do some research to find out and talk to your acquirer to see what rates they're offering for these transactions. These are, typically, even if you aggregate up to the limit of $15, these are typically smaller value transactions. And so there are options, different companies are responding with different options for this. So I would say people seem to reach out to their partners and see what is available. I think they can have some surprising findings these days. Pleasantly surprising.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have a few notes to add to that. So thank you, Satinder, for that question. This summer, I spoke about open payments at APTA, one of the APTA meetings, and talked specifically about this. When we're looking at transaction costs across all of our sales channels, as adoption of open payments increases, that number starts to look better. There's still fixed costs associated with open payments. So when we were processing very few transactions, the cost was considerably higher than our closed loop sales channels. But as the numbers are starting to, move closer and closer together, the open payment transaction costs are starting to look better. they are way better than our most expensive sales channels as well, like our walk-in offices, our ticket vending machines, our IVR. So that is something that I, will continue to keep an eye on over time.
Very good. Thank you, Sophia. An additional question from Ryan. Do either, any of you have any statistics relative to split between plastic phones or other smart devices?
I do not know.
I can't speak to specific stats, but I know that if you take a look at some of the information that's on the MTA's website, they may be able to share some of that information. But additionally and anecdotally, within the New York system, I think there's a really interesting case for Apple Pay and digital wallets specifically. You're seeing a lot of customers who use the Omni system for the first time, using their phone to do it, and then keeping that up. I think second to that is certainly plastic cards. I think as consumers have a new way to use an old device, tapping their card versus inserting it, it's certainly it's made it more appealing, and so you're seeing growth there as well. But I apologize, I can't really sort of break down other devices, whether it's other payment devices, other types of phones or watches or that. I don't have specific statistics, but I know that it's significant in New York.
I would like to add that it would be so interesting to me if the card brands ever wanted to publish this information specific to open payments, because even from an agency perspective, as we're processing, contactless bank cards or bank cards in the mobile wallet or on the watch, to us, they all look exactly the same. So we can't differentiate between those different form factors, and would be really interested in kind of seeing even macro level statistics about that breakdown.
Yeah, I'd be remiss without adding. One of the nice things about the USPF is we do have representation from each of the major payment brands, right? And they oftentimes at each of our member meetings they'll do a quick recap relative to contactless adoption and the split between physical cards and digital. I don't know if they go much further than that, but Ryan, be happy to share some of those statistics in the background with you if it'd be of value. Okay. There was a couple questions that we had submitted to beforehand that I wanted to come back to because I think that it might be of value to the group. Rory's, I'm going to come back to a couple of the questions that you had submitted. Is on the first one is, what do you believe is the most important placement for marketing messaging?
Honestly, it's the point of sale. And that's true in the transit space as well as it is in the retail space. Anything that you can do to interrupt the way that somebody pays with a new way to pay at the point of sale is really critical. And I think that's the place where messaging awareness really made the New York story kind of sing, is that, you walk into the subway station and there's an entire new ad campaign telling you how to use the system. It's completely different. It engages and it interrupts you and changes the habit from insert to tap, from swiping a Metro card in New York to tapping a credit card or a debit card or a mobile device.
Very good. Thank you for that. Is also, I wanted to come back to the other question that you submitted, is what can smaller cities learn from New York City and London? I'm sure they're their own beasts, but is there any takeaways from lessons learned in some of the larger cities, be it New York or London?
I think the biggest story that I see is collaboration. When you have the ability to take a look at your local ecosystem and understand who benefits most from transit, you've got your ridership statistics, you know who your users are, and then who are the businesses that matter to them, who is looking to advertise to those types of riders, and looking to sort of cast a wide net and get creative about how you approach your marketing and how you approach your advertising. I think there's a lot of really great examples out there in smaller cities. Certainly in California, we've seen a lot of really great marketing coming out of Monterey Salinas, as well as a number of the other cities in the Cal ITP system. So I think there's a lot of really great case studies there. And I think to sum it up in a word, it's collaboration and looking for good partners.
Very good. Thank you, Roy. Sophia, I wanted to come to a couple of questions that you submitted as well. Is obviously when you're dealing with the mass public, as a variety of different issues pop up, but can you speak a little bit around what customer support is needed and what are the main customer complaints or questions that come up?
Right, so there was a good amount of training that needed to go in for our call center when we launched Open Payments because, call centers get a wide variety of customer questions. But I think the most common one is people seeing a charge on their bank statement and not remembering where it was for or not knowing what it's for. So that is a pretty common question that comes in, especially because we do aggregate taps within one day. So users who tap 2 or more times will reach the one-day fare cap, which is a $5 charge. So they'll see one $5 charge on their bank statement. We have enough users in the system now that it takes more than the last 4 digits of their card to look them up in our system. But on their bank statement, there is a unique ID that we can capture to look up their full history. And so with that, call centers are able to sort of talk people through and explain to them the charges that they are seeing. That's been the biggest question and the biggest complaint that's come in, which is really just back to that education piece as people see new types of transactions on their bank statements.
Very good. Is a follow-on to that one is if you could speak a little bit about too what an inspection solution is and how that would work for Open Payments.
Yeah, and I was glad for the question earlier about offline devices because, this is another question we get. People, first-time users who are using their Open Payment card, there's a lot of doubt and ambiguity around if transactions are honored, if transfers are honored, how do transfers work? And what happens if they get inspected? Are they going to have to log into their bank account and show the tap on their, history? So just kind of easing those concerns that, transfers are honored even with an Open Payment card. And then if you're fare inspected, all you have to do is tap whichever media you used to tap on the validator. And that's a really important distinction. So if you used your credit card in your in Apple Pay, you need to use the credit card in Apple Pay to be inspected. You can't use the physical credit card to be inspected. And if you had a valid tap, that will render as valid in the inspection app. So, our frontline staff, our inspectors, there's also some education with them as they have to communicate to riders in the field, sort of how does fare inspection work for Open Payments.
Very good. Thank you. A lot of good dialogue. As I don't see any additional questions in the chat box. So Devin, if you want to go ahead and move to the last slide here, just want to pay a special thank you to the panelists. So Rory, Lawrence, Sophia, Dave, thank you again for joining in this afternoon. Also, thank you to the close to 60 plus registrants that dialed in this afternoon. Hopefully this was of value to you, as we will take the recording from this session and post it on the USPF website for availability moving forward. So if you do have questions around any of the content, please look for that. You can always reach out to Devin or myself too if there's additional questions, and we can get in touch with the panelists if need be. But thank you again for joining. Look forward to having you on our next session as we move forward. Hope everyone has a happy holiday season and a great afternoon. Thank you.